Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. With Halloween only 6 months away, I figured it's never too early to start building something spooky. So today, we're stepping back into the shadows of the Haunted Mansion with another eerie creation. I'm going to show you how I made a flameless skull candle inspired by that iconic ride. It's aged, it's weathered, and just ghostly enough to look like it's been flickering in the darkness, patiently waiting for its next victim. I meant visitor. Well, like every build I do, I always start with a quick thumbnail sketch of the overall design. I need to see the whole picture and make sure everything lines up proportionately before I dive in. Most of the materials were already in my shop, including this skull I had lying around from last Halloween. From there, assembling this prop and getting it lit up should be a smooth ride. I hope. Here are the materials I will be using for today's haunt. 2 very old books. A not-so-spooky life-size skull. This 1¼ inch PVC pipe trimmed to 8 inches. 18 gauge wire cut to 30 inches. A 3.3-volt DC flickering LED light. A 9-volt battery pack with housing. And a 3.3-volt buck converter module. After cleaning the PVC pipe with lacquer thinner, I use a marker to draw a jagged line along the top of the candle, marking where the wick would have melted. This creates the illusion of dripping, melted wax. Now I follow the pencil markings and cut the tops using my bandsaw. No need for perfection here. Close enough for government work always gets the job done. To run the wire up through the skull and power the LED bulb, I cut the PVC pipe at an angle. That way, when I feed it through the base of the skull, I can easily grab it from the opening at the top and pull it through. At least, that's the plan. At this stage, I grab my rotary tool with a sanding drum attachment and carefully smooth out the angled opening at the bottom of the PVC pipe. This helps prevent the wire from catching when I pull it through later. Once that's done, I move on to shaping the top of the candle, slowly refining the edges and contours until it has a more natural, melted appearance. Oh, and I almost forgot. Always wear a respirator and nitrile gloves when sanding any plastic. For our dearly departed friend here, I'll remove his jawline, first by snapping it off from both sides, because where he's going, he won't be doing much talking. These are the materials I will be using to weather the skull. A pair of nitrile gloves. An oil-based stain by Minwax called Espresso. And a folded staining cloth. To weather the skull, I'm using a ½ pint of oil-based Minwax stain. I generously apply the stain over the entire surface, making sure it seeps into all the deep crevices and hard-to-reach areas. There's no need to be neat here. The messier and more uneven it looks at this stage, the more natural and aged the final result will feel. Since oil-based stain can be strong and a bit cumbersome to work with, I always make sure I'm in a well-ventilated area while wearing a respirator. The goal is to apply a heavy, even coat, fully saturating the skull, so the stain settles into every detail and really enhances the texture. Once complete coverage has taken place, I sit it on the shelf so the stain can set for about 5 minutes.
5 minutes later.
At about 5 minutes later, I begin removing the high points of the stain from the skull. Working in random spots and trying not to remove too much, this will add a natural, organic appeal to the prop, making it more realistic to the eye. With the skull on standby, I turn my attention to the books. I'll use my metal straight edge to mark the opening. I begin by marking the interior edge of the book's spine, using it as a guide to scribe my first line. Next, I move to the outside edge of the book and mark my second line. Finally, I mark the narrow ends, outlining the area I'll remove to hollow out the pages. Off camera, I drilled pilot holes and then used 1-inch drywall screws to securely fasten the book together, ensuring it stays solid after howling. Sorry, I meant hollowing. And with that, the last screw is in place. Here is what it looks like. Now it's time to start cutting into the pages. I align a straight edge along the pencil lines, then with a steady hand, begin slicing into the sheets, making each pass slightly deeper than the last. When all the cuts are complete, this will create a hollow space large enough to comfortably fit the battery housing inside the book. I feel this is going to take a very long time.
Many unbearable hours later.
After many hours of work, I'm finally starting to see the finish line. Eureka! I finally made it! And here is the waste material. Next, I attach the book to the bottom inside cover using hot melt glue. I apply a steady bead along the inside frame for the pages to sit, making sure it fully seals the bottom half of the book for a permanent hold. At this stage, I use Mod Podge to seal the hollowed-out interior of the book, covering all the raw edges. This creates a smooth, finished contour inside the cavity. I apply a thick, generous coat to every interior surface, ensuring the entire cavity is fully sealed and protected. Once that's done, I slip a piece of parchment paper between the upper cover and the pages, place a heavy weight on top, and let it dry overnight. This helps everything set flat and secure. Off camera, I hollowed out the second book the same way as the first. Since this one will sit at the bottom and won't be visible on the inside, I simply seal it shut with hot glue.
The next morning.
After curing overnight, the books are as solid as a stiff in a graveyard.
1 week later.
Now I will focus on the weathered skull that's been dying. I mean, lying around for about a week curing. You know what I mean. Okay, at this stage, I'll use my circle template to mark out a circle, giving me a clear guide for where the cut will be made. I'll be using my cordless drill with a hole saw attachment to make the cut. Once the opening is complete, I'll clean up the area and then test fit the candle to ensure everything sits properly. So far, so good. To clean up the edges, I'll use my deburring tool, carefully working it around the opening and scraping away any rough spots until the edges are smooth and even. To test and see how the skull looks like on the book's cover, I'll line it up in an interesting way that makes it look pleasing. After trying out a few different positions, I've decided to angle the skull slightly to give it a more dramatic and visually interesting pose. Now it's time to apply a small amount of hot melt glue to tack it in place. With the skull now in place, I'll use an extra long drill bit to carefully open up the hole, creating a clear path to feed the power wire through. Great, the hole turned out exactly as planned and worked like a charm. For a little extra insurance, I'll drive 3/4-inch drywall screws up from beneath the cover and into the plastic skull, permanently securing it to the book. They'll be completely hidden underneath, but they'll ensure everything stays firmly in place. Think of it as a belt and suspenders approach. Now I'll feed this 18-gauge wire through the inside cover, guide it up into the skull, and pull it through to the opening on top, where the candle will sit. To power the flickering LED bulb, I created a simple wiring diagram outlining all the components needed to power the skull candle. To control the flickering LED, I'm using a standard 9-volt battery and housing that features an on-off switch. To join the wires together, I'll use heat shrink solder butt connectors where required. A small DC buck converter module is used to regulate the power coming in from the 9-volt battery down to a safe and steady 3.3 volts. The module supplies the correct amount of power to the LED, ensuring it operates safely and consistently. And last but certainly not least is this DC 3.3 volt Cobb LED flicker bulb. This bulb is specifically designed to mimic the natural flickering movement of a candle flame, creating an authentic glow without using an actual flame. So let's go and light this candle. Here I'll connect the two wires together, just as shown in the previous diagram, making sure the connection is secure. And with a little movie magic, the connection is now complete. Now that that's out of the way, I'll tape the wire coming into the book, flush with the inside of the cover. Now I'll feed the wire through the PVC pipe and out the top side. Then I'll do a quick dry fit to make sure everything lines up properly and sits exactly where it should. Once I'm happy with the way it looks, I'll drop a huge glob of hot melt glue into the inside of the PVC pipe, so when it cures, it will be secure. After connecting the wire leads to the buck converter and the flickering bulb, this is how the setup looks. Here's the 9-volt battery that will power the bulb. Let's turn it on and see if everything works. Cool, it works! To hold the bulb in place, I'll use 1/2-inch gator foam, cutting a center sleeve trapping the bulb. All I have to do is to slide the bulb through the bottom slot and set it into place. Now the fun part begins, adding the simulated dripping wax to really bring this build to life. Well, you know what I mean. First, I'll seal the gap where the faux candle meets the skull. Starting from the bottom, I'll apply the white hot melt glue in a random pattern, avoiding any uniformity so as to sell the final effect. To permanently join the two books, I'll apply a generous amount of hot melt glue and press them together at a slight angle for a more interesting look. Off camera, I painted the inside of the book white to give it a cleaner, finished look, which hides any imperfections. All that's left is to attach a small strip of Velcro to both the battery housing and the book's interior floor, and with that, this build is officially complete. And there you have it, my take on a skull candle inspired by the Haunted Mansion. I really love how the layered, dripping wax detail combined with the subtle, realistic flicker of the LED bulb gives this piece a hauntingly realistic glow and that eerie, old-world charm. When the light is on, it casts just enough movement and shadow to make it feel similar to a real candle that's been slowly melting away in some forgotten corner of a haunted estate. This would look incredible as part of your Halloween decor, displayed on a mantle, worked into a themed shelf arrangement, or featured as a spooky centerpiece in a haunted escape room setup. It's the kind of piece that quietly draws attention, something guests would notice, lean in toward, and take a second look at. To help support the channel, please check out my Etsy store at toyandpropmasters.etsy.com, where you'll find something for everyone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next build.